Heading into 2026, Bank of America operates as an indestructible, global financial monolith holding trillions of dollars in assets. But beneath that massive scale is a steep deficit of public goodwill. The institution is constantly fighting off consumer complaints over unauthorized accounts, excessive fees, and withheld credit card rewards. It is a striking irony. The elite corporate titan that everyday people love to hate actually began as a radical experiment in working-class trust. The founder of this banking empire was Amadeo Giannini, the son of Italian immigrants and an outsider whom the Wall Street establishment absolutely despised. To understand the quiet wars that dictate our modern economy, we have to look at how Giannini's grassroots community project grew into the ultimate establishment giant. Giannini learned resilience early. When he was 7, his father was shot dead during a labor dispute. He was forced into the family business, taking on heavy administrative responsibilities just to help his mother survive. By 1904, he launched the Bank of Italy in San Francisco. His strict mandate was to provide basic financial services to poor, non-English-speaking immigrants, a demographic the established banks completely ignored. Less than 2 years later, a massive earthquake shattered the region's economy. Most of San Francisco was reduced to smoking ruins. While other bankers panicked and locked up their funds, Giannini and his stepfather loaded all their cash and gold onto items, disguised them under crates of fruit, and set up a makeshift desk directly on the ruined streets. He bypassed traditional banking rules entirely. He offered unsecured loans to devastated immigrants based on a simple handshake and his personal judgment of their character. Standing on the ruins of Washington Street, Giannini realized that a bank's real capital isn't found in a vault. It's the belief of the people in the street. Giannini used that immense public loyalty to scale his business into a national branch network called Transamerica. But pushing a working-class bank into New York was seen as a direct invasion of elite territory. The undisputed king of that territory was Jack Morgan, son of J.P. Morgan, who viewed this outsider as an immediate threat to his dominance. Morgan launched a coordinated smear campaign. He rallied Wall Street traders to aggressively short Transamerica, engineering market panic to crush the value of Giannini's stock. The pressure worked. Morgan's allies inside Transamerica orchestrated a boardroom coup and forced Giannini to resign from the very empire he built. But Giannini counterattacked by bypassing the boardroom entirely. He launched a proxy fight, directly asking his massive base of everyday working-class shareholders to vote out the current management. Because the common people trusted him far more than Wall Street executives, they sided with him. Giannini fired the Morgan loyalists, proving that intense public loyalty could overpower immense institutional capital. Fast forward past Giannini's death to the 1980s, the bank had dropped its community roots and swelled into a massive, complacent bureaucracy, full of sterile procedures and identical desks. In 1980, what looked like a minor administrative error ballooned into a $95 million fraud, a massive blow for that era that internal management compared to a Pearl Harbor attack on their stability. The monetary loss was significant, but the damage to their reputation was fatal. It exposed the bank as a vulnerable, dying giant, exactly the kind of prey corporate takeover artists like Sandy Weill lived for. To survive, the bank's leadership deployed a complex defensive tactic known as a poison pill. As we can see in this animated chart, the strategy deliberately divides and multiplies the bank's stock, flooding the market to make the takeover mathematically impossible for the acquirer to afford. It worked, but it cemented a new reality. The institution had completely abandoned the handshake loans of its past, replacing them with a rigid, heavily engineered corporate fortress. By 2008, this reliance on aggressive financial engineering pushed them to acquire toxic assets like Countrywide Financial. They survived the resulting crash only by accepting a $45 billion government bailout, cementing their status as the exact Wall Street elite Giannini originally went to war against. In the aftermath of the 2008 crash, CEO Brian Moynihan took over an institution facing a total collapse of its most valuable asset, its reputation. Moynihan needed to prove the bank was still viable. He secured a $5 billion investment from Warren Buffett. He didn't actually need the cash. He needed to rent Buffett's immense credibility to buy a public vote of confidence. Heading into 2026, the bank remains highly profitable, but it is largely insulated by its regulatory status as an institution that is simply too big to fail. While the government provides a safety net, the bank continues to struggle with high bureaucratic friction and endless consumer dissatisfaction at the ground level. A bank relies on the belief that your money is safe. If a financial institution relies entirely on its massive scale and ignores the grassroots legacy that built it, it risks losing the only metric that actually guarantees long-term survival: the trust of the people it serves.